Hi, happy Tuesday, everyone. I'm so excited for this conversation because we're talking about money. I don't know about you, but it feels like a big secret at work. And so I want to talk about the five money conversations every woman needs to have. So I don't know where this origin of like, don't talk about your salary, we shouldn't talk about money started, like, as a global scale. In fact, I can remember growing up, and again, I was as a really curious little kid. Like I wanted to know about everything. I wanted to know like how babies were made. I wanted to know why my baby sister was so much younger than me. Like I just asked my parents everything, including like how much money do you make? And I can even be honest that my teenager is starting to ask those questions, because we're curious. And I still remember my mom saying to me, "Oh, honey, it's not polite to ask people, it's not polite to talk about money. You definitely don't want to ask people how much they make." So I'm curious. Give me a like or a heart if you kind of heard like this, "Ooh, don't talk about money." Or maybe tell me in the comments, like what has your family or community of origin always told you about talking about money? Like what messages have you been taught? I think that's really fascinating. Um, because this whole don't talk about money, I think permeates a lot of our culture. And it was really interesting because at the time, I was younger, didn't really think a whole lot about money. I still remember my goal was to be a TV meteorologist. And so I was going off to do college to do that thing. And when I was in college, my mom had a career change. She actually became a financial advisor. And I remember I was home from a college visit and she pulled out like this little paper slider tool that like showed, based on how much money you would invest every month is how much money you would have in like 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And I remember just being totally fascinated by this. And I was like, "Oh, wow." It was like the first time that, I mean, I always knew about the time value of money, but when they teach it in schools, it's different. And like, this is like, I had seen money in a whole new way. And as my college career went on, I actually changed my major from being a meteorology, TV, weather person major to political science. And it's kind of ironic because I actually then ended up in business working in for an investment company and then eventually in HR. And during my time in HR, I have negotiated and had probably thousands of salary conversations. And I often think to myself, I'm like, you know what? Like I went from being a TV meteorology major to what I'm doing today. And it's kind of a weird juxtaposition because weather is like the safest topic to talk about, right? When you don't know what to talk about, you should always talk about the weather. And I'm like, you know what? Money should be as easy to talk about as the weather. And I know that there's been a lot of those rules in corporate, right? Like, don't talk about your salary. But actually, there is no, according to is it the labor board? It's actually not prohibited to talk about your salary. It's just something that organizations have discouraged. And I'm not that also surprised because in all of my decades of working in HR, there are salary discrepancies. And so when you talk about your salary, that can be a very uncomfortable topic if there's a lot of disparity in the organization. So today, I want to talk about why talking about money is so important. I want to share the five money conversations every woman needs to have. And this is really important because there still is a gender pay gap. And while there are lots of reasons why the gender pay gap persists, um, you know, it doesn't change the fact that across all scales and all industries, women tend to get paid less than men. Another really fascinating statistics, and I learned this when I was working in investments, and it holds true today. I know my husband would validate this. He's a financial advisor, and he would say there's still a wealth gap. And that is that, upon retirement, women tend to live longer and they have less invested, even though the research shows that women can tend to be better investors than men. And so there persists this wealth gap too, because like one of the things that I observed with the pay gap, for those of y'all who work for organizations who have like a company match for your 401k, if you are being paid less than a man, guess what? That means the percentage of the match of your salary that they put in your retirement is also less than a man's match. So you're earning less free money in the terms of a match that men earn. And that's why these conversations are so important. So the five conversations are to challenge the systems, to notice your self-talk, to evaluate your savings, to negotiate your salary, and to ask for support. So I want to unpack these briefly. And if you're on my email list, I'll be sending an email about this on Thursday with all of these in more detail. It's actually going to be in my upcoming book, Closing the Confidence Gap, How to Boost Your Peace, Your Potential, and Your Paycheck. So there's lots more ways to get more info on this. But the first one is challenging the systems. I think it's really important that when you go into an organization and maybe you're thinking about a job change, maybe you're thinking about having a conversation at performance review time, maybe you're thinking about asking for a raise, it's just to simply ask your organization, what is your compensation philosophy? Like most mature organizations have a compensation philosophy. And that could be something like, oh, we always want to pay top of market. We actively evaluate. I have a client, an organizational client, who's very vocal about the fact that they're actively looking at gender pay gap differences and closing any gaps based on all of their metrics wherever they can. They've been very forward about that and transparent in organizations. Some organizations are very transparent. I know for a while, Whole Foods published everyone's salary because that was a way to ensure transparency. And when that happens, trust builds. Some organizations say, well, we may not pay top of market in every market that we're in, but we have XYZ in available benefits. And so sometimes that can be compensation as well. Another way that you can challenge the systems, something that I've personally done, is I have written to my state legislature to remove the requirement to submit your previous salary on job applications. Well, why is that important? Well, because when we're filling out job applications and women and people of color have traditionally been paid less, it can create an anchoring bias. And so then if the job offer is based on what someone has previously made, they will continue to be underpaid, especially in a place where they've been underpaid. Their level of salary, in my opinion, this is what I argued, is not directly correlated to their level of performance. So especially when folks have been continuously underpaid. So the first one is to challenge the systems, ask about the systems. The second one is to notice your self-talk. So I had a client that I was working with, a one-to-one coaching client, and she unfortunately had found out that she had a coworker doing about the same work that was making more than her. And she was really upset. So we were talking about this, and then she had gone and done a bunch of research, done some market research. You can look at, market research data like PayScale, Glassdoor, even LinkedIn has a lot of salary information to determine, what a good market rate will be. She gathered up all of her accomplishments, and she was telling me about this. And I said, this is great. I said, what happened when you asked? And she's like, I guess I just feel like I shouldn't have to ask. And so we got into this whole money mindset conversation about why your mindset is so important, because there are a lot of old messages that we've been taught about money. I know, like for mine, it was always, money's really tight. You shouldn't ask about money. And, that can really permeate some of your behaviors. And so it's really important to talk about, or think about and notice your self-talk that you have about money. Like, I shouldn't have to ask. Money is tight. It will look pushy if I ask about my salary. It looks greedy to negotiate a raise. And I want you to really challenge some of those self-talk conversations that you have. If you are an entrepreneur, like, I also want you to notice this money self-talk as well, because a lot of that comes into how we set our prices, is the self-talk that's happening in our minds. And so I want you to think about, what would you ask for if you were looking at something equitably, like versus what men and women would make, and not listening to maybe some of the internalized messages that are no longer working for you any longer. So the third one that I want you to take a look at is the next one, which is to negotiate your salary. So negotiating your salary, I actually have, and I'll drop it in the link in the comments on my website. I actually have a negotiating your salary tip sheet, because I can tell you as a former HR person that men negotiate their salaries 4 times more than women, especially when they're looking to land a new job. I can also tell you that when as recruiters, as HR people, like, we are prepared to talk about salary. So I just want you to know that, like, while everybody feels all weird about the salary conversation, I can tell you that being on the other end, being an HR person, like, we're ready to talk about salary. Like, this is part of our job. It's not emotional. It's just data. And I just wanted you to know that, so you know that, like, this is a safe conversation. Men typically ask as a starting point higher than women. And so I want you to take an active role in negotiating your salary, knowing that us as HR folks, like, we're ready to talk about it. Like, this is part of our job. It's not a thing. I know it feels like a thing on the other end because I've been on the other end. But remember that is a really great ways to start closing the pay gaps up front, is to negotiate your salary and ask for what you deserve. The fourth conversation that I want you to have is to evaluate your savings. I want you to even just notice what sort of active role you play in your finances. If you're partnered up, do you play an active role in having savings and conversations with your partner? If you're single, have you had a conversation with a financial advisor or a planner or somebody about making sure that you're actively saving what you should for retirement? Because there is that wealth gap. And this is not a conversation sometimes that many women have been brought up with at home and talking about managing money, but women tend to outlive men by about 5 years. So at some point, you're going to have this conversation. So this was a little scary for you. You know that you can reach out to a financial advisor. Many folks offer consultations for free, and many employers offer like a financial wellness program as part of their benefits package. So if that feels a little scary, maybe reach out to your HR folks and ask like what sort of financial wellness program they have, because lots of times that they are partnered with a bank that can at least, set you up with an initial conversation with an advisor. The fifth one is to ask for support. This is kind of an indirect money conversation, but I don't know if you know this, but there's a leadership development gap. And when men are promoted, they are 13% more likely to get leadership skills training, and they're 22% more likely to be paired up with a formal mentor. This helps ensure their success at higher levels, and higher levels tend to get paid more money. Also, that investment in that mentor or those skills is a money conversation. They are literally getting money to develop their skills. So as a woman, I want you to ask for the support that you deserve to grow your leadership career, so that you can ensure security and promotions and success in those next levels of leadership. So asking for support is a money conversation in two ways. One, you could be asking your employer to fund a leadership development program or coaching. Or if this is not something that they offer, I have lots of clients who work with me because their company gives them a stipend. They're like, you know what, we can't support the level of leadership development that we know our folks need. Here, you get $2,000 a year to use towards your professional development. And that's a lot of how people come to work with me. So ask your organization what type of support that they offer for you to continually invest in the success of your career. So it's time to close the money and wealth gaps for women in the workplace and honestly in the world. And women can have 5 conversations to help drive can have 5 conversations to help close this gap. So just to recap, challenge the systems, notice your self-talk, negotiate your salary, evaluate your savings, and ask for support. So hopefully these are helpful. I'm going to drop some links or some comments below that can give you some additional resources, but there's 3 places you can go. You can always go to my website at kelliraythompson.com. And I have blogs on this topic. In my download section, I have a salary negotiation guide. And then make sure that you're staying in touch with me for my book coming up, because I have an entire chapter on this in my new book, Closing the Confidence Gap, called Knowing Your Worth. So good luck out there in your money conversations. Let me know how they go. If you have any questions about this, I'd love to hear from you. So drop me a DM, send me a message or comment, and I'd be happy to keep the conversation going. So hope y'all have a good week. Ask for your money, and I will see you all next Tuesday.